Good morning, everyone. All information contained herein is provided solely for educational purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for professional or legal advice. Should you decide to act upon any information contained in this presentation, you do so at your own risk. While the information posted has been verified to the best of our abilities, we cannot guarantee that there are no mistakes or errors. This is the Enviroschool program at the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality. Today, we are presenting The World of Waste, Part 2. I'm Tamika Priolo, coordinator for Enviroschool, and I will be moderating today. We will be muting everyone except for the speakers. However, just as a precaution, go ahead and keep yourself muted individually as well. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A option only and not the chat. Type in your questions and we will answer the ones pertaining to the topics discussed at the end of the presentation. Slides and a recording of this webinar will be available on the Enviroschool and LDEQ YouTube page. There will be a poll at the end of this webinar to provide your feedback so we can improve our session. So please complete before logging off. Email any questions, comments, or concerns to enviroschool@la.gov. We have two speakers today, Jody Kimball and Dutch Donlin. Jody Kimball graduated in 2000 with a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from the College of Staten Island, New York. She has been with the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality since 2002, working as an environmental scientist in various programs, including regulation development, state implementation plan, emissions inventory, solid waste permits, and the environmental scientist manager over waste permits. Jody is currently a senior staff scientist in the waste tire section of waste permits. Dutch Donlin received a BS in geology from the University of Southwestern Louisiana in 1985. After working several years in petroleum exploration, he became geologist supervisor with LDEQ, managing geologists overseeing contaminated site assessments and groundwater remediation projects. From 2013 to 2016, he served as administrator of the Waste Permits Division here at LDEQ. In addition to hydrogeology, contaminant hydrogeology, and permitting, he has extensive experience in waste tire recycling and regulatory development. He currently serves as a senior environmental scientist in the waste tire section of the Waste Permits Division. So Jody, we will begin with you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Jody Kimball. I work in the Waste Permits Division, and I'm responsible for gathering the information and compiling the annual recycling report. DEQ is required by the statutes to report yearly on the resource recovery and recycling programs in the state. We have a 25% reduction goal. DEQ encourages solid waste reduction and recycling and promotes the recovery of recyclable materials. Our annual recycling report is a collection of the parish and city reports we receive on a voluntary basis. This report is sent to the legislature and is available on our website. Presently, we ask for the information by September every year for the preceding year. I do send out an email reminder to all the recycling contacts by July 1st to submit their reports. The annual recycling report forms can be found as a PDF and mailed in or emailed and faxed in to the department. And also we have a link for you to do a online version of the recycling report. On the right side of the slide, you'll see what the website looks like. And about midway down, you'll see where the online, it's a little bit further than midway, where you can click online to do the report. And then towards the bottom of that picture, you see where the PDF is. And the links can be found underneath the bullets on the left side. This is what the recycling report looks like. We ask that it's completed as much as possible. Even if there is no recycling program present in that area that's reporting, we ask at a minimum for you to identify the total waste landfill, that section, and under section 2 and A. Just even if that's the only thing you can report because you don't recycle, that's still helpful. This is an example of a completed and a pretty good example of a good report of someone submitting their report this last year for 2020. So you can see they did all sections of A, the total waste reduction, the landfill, and the percentage reduction. Along with that, they do have a recycling plan and it has been updated. This is actually an example of someone submitting an incomplete report. We do sadly have a lot of these. So that's why we ask, at least if you submit the total waste landfill in tons, that at least gives us some basis as far as our percentages throughout the state of what is and what isn't recycled. And this is actually the bottom part of the good example of what they did, they sent in for that parish. So this is a continuation of a bad example. As you can see, they didn't submit any information. Here is a very important section of the report that gives us any data on those that did recycle. As you can see, the side on the section on the right, the picture is a good example, and it gave a lot of the information, even to the point of composting and food scraps and the total recycling in that area. This is the kind of report we'd like to see. This last page of the report, we typically don't get a lot of information, but at least we need to have the name, the date, and the signature completed on this portion. So here are the highlights of our 2019 annual recycling report. 28 entities reported. This represented 57% of Louisiana's population, where in 2018, only 47% of the population was represented. The annual waste reduction ranged from 0% to 37%. 16 parishes reported no recycling. The overall recycling rate for the state was 5%. This was a decrease from 12.8% reported in 2018. And this is believed to be due to the many curbside recycling programs being canceled as a result of China's national sort policy. In 2018, China banned the import of most plastic and paper, in addition to tightening its restrictions on accepting other materials. This policy resulted in a drop in China's plastic imports by 99%. The effects of this ban can be seen locally through parishes such as Ascension that no longer offered recycling services, facilities in Metairie no longer accepting residential recyclables, drop-off sites in Sulphur and St. Charles closing, and scale backs occurred in Jefferson Parish, New Orleans, and Gretna. So this is the actual recycling report that was sent to the legislature, and it can be found on our website. This is pretty much just the entire thing that I just summarized as far as the effect of the China national sort policy and are the entities that reported. This is the second page. If anyone is interested in viewing all this report and also any of the raw data that was submitted by the parishes, it is public records in our EDMS, and that link at the bottom, you'll find everyone's report compiled into one large document. This is the summary that went along with the recycling report. There were 64 parishes in Louisiana, and as you could see, only 28 reports were received. You can also see here the overall rate of recycling was 5%. So what are the biggest issues with the parish reports? Consistency of participation. As pointed out, there are 64 parishes, but only 28 entities reported for 2019. Currently, only 19 have reported for 2020. I am actively still contacting some of the recycling contacts and still getting some reports in right now for 2020. Completeness of reports is an issue. Parishes with no recycling don't provide any kind of data. As I mentioned before on the forum, even if they don't recycle, we'd like to see at least the tons landfill. Many parishes provide only totals with no breakdowns of materials, as seen in that chart, that the chart's just not filled out. Recycling plans are created but not updated. In 2019, out of the 28 that reported, only 12 reported having a recycling plan, and only 8 reported to have ever updated that plan. What are our challenges? The biggest challenge is to get all the parishes to report landfill waste for an accurate basis. Another challenge is adequate resources within DEQ. By this, we mean resources and manpower so that we can work one-on-one with recycling coordinators and maintain and improve reporting. Another is education of materials that can be recycled. By this meaning public education as to what can be recycled and how to discard. This is important so that upon separation at the recycling facility, materials are recycled and not returned to the landfill. Is recycling effective? The EPA estimates that recycling rate has increased from less than 7% in 1960 to just over 35% in 2017. Some materials like paper and aluminum are recycled at high levels, while others like plastic lag behind. When is recycling not effective? When recyclables become contaminated, when items are placed in the wrong bin, or when dirty food containers get into the recycling bin. Contamination prevents large batches of materials from being recycled. So what does go in the bin? DEQ has links on our website where you can view this, but also I found that Baton Rouge Recycling Office has a good handout, a good example of how we can ensure our recyclables are actually recycled. So this shows you items that are acceptable materials in the recycling bin. So paper and cardboard should be flattened, but should be recycled. Metal cans should be emptied and rinsed, meaning aluminum, tin, and steel cans, pie tins. Plastic containers and glass containers should also be recycled, and they should also be emptied and rinsed before placing in the bin. What is not acceptable in the recycling cart? Do not place your recyclables inside plastic bags. No plastic bags or plastic should be placed into the recycling bin. No clothing or linens, no tanglers such as hoses, wires, and chains, and no large items such as metal, plastic, wood, and glass. So some fun facts about recycling. A single recycled plastic bottle saves enough energy to run a 100-watt bulb for 4 hours. Recycling plastic saves twice as much energy as it takes to burn. It takes 5 recycled plastic bottles to make enough fiber fill to stuff a ski jacket. Motor oil never wears out, it just gets dirty. It can be recycled. It takes 500 years for an average plastic water bottle to fully decompose. The amount of plastic film and wrap produced annually could shrink back the state of Texas. Aluminum is the #1 recycled item. Americans use 65 billion aluminum soda cans every year. In only 3 months, enough aluminum cans are thrown out in the US to rebuild all of our commercial air fleets. Aluminum cans can make up less than 1% of the waste in the US because they are the #1 recycled item. There is no limit to the number of times you can recycle an aluminum can. Recycling just 2 cans can save the amount of energy it takes to power a PC for a single workday. You can make 20 new cans from recycled material using the same amount of energy it takes to make 1 brand new can. And I included the picture on the right. It is a business here in Baton Rouge that does take aluminum for recycling, and that's a list of the different types of aluminums and different things they take at EMR. So thank you guys for listening. I'm going to hand it over to Dutch now. We're going to save all the questions to the end, and if you have any questions, you can also send them in the Q&A.
Okay, we'll go on to everybody's favorite subject, waste tires. This is what I'm going to try to cover today in this presentation. mission statute summary, a lot of just basic explanation of the program, elements of the program, and how the program works here at DEQ. I did want to say something else. Okay. All right. This is the mission. Basically, it's just to prevent promiscuous disposal of tires, and also to make sure the tires are recycled if at all possible, and to try to prevent just landfilling of tires or waste tire material. Try to make some kind of better use out of the tire itself when it becomes a waste tire. Statutes that govern waste tires is Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 30. And particularly Section 2418, as all statutes do, there are prohibitions and mandates. The prohibitions are basically the same thing. We don't want people to dispose of tires, and unless they're disposed properly, either at a landfill or at a processing facility that can be where the waste tire can be processed and used for a higher order. Mandates are for the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality. We are the agency entrusted to carry out the statute, the 2418 statute. The Waste Tire Management Fund is included in that statute. We're going to go through that a little bit more later. That the funds that are paid out, the money that is paid out to processors for projects come out of the fund. The fees that everyone pays when they buy tires go into the fund. So that's basically the conveyor belt, if you will, on that. And the fees are established by statute as well. The enabling legislation with regards to the statutes are contained in the Environmental Regulatory Code solid waste section. That's just Chapter 7, particularly Chapter 105, which also has the recycling. It's recycling and recycling waste tires in Chapter 105. So what is in the regulations? Well, yeah, the usual items, definitions and permits, how to get permits. We also have some individual items. We have beneficial end use projects. We have the manifest that I'm going to explain a little bit later. Also, the fees are codified in the regulations. A lot of definitions that are important. I just want to point out a few of them to you. Obviously, we're going to be talking about tires today. There's different types of tires. We're going to get into that in just a minute, a little bit more detail. Also, waste tire material. And we're going to get into that in a couple of minutes too, a little bit more detail. But these are definitions that you need to be aware of. Here's some more. Who's dealing with tires, generators, transporters, processors. Those are the main three folks that actually handle tires in the state of Louisiana. That's all defined in the regulations. If you've never seen waste tire material, this is not a great photograph of it because there was no scale in the photograph, but I approximated a scale to the side, about 1 foot there. So if you take that scale and put it inside the photograph, you can see these pieces are about 2, 3, maybe 4-inch nominal tire chips. There's different names for them. The darker colored material is actually the rubber and other materials of the tire. The lighter color, the orange kind of rusty looking material, well, that's tire metal that has oxidized and is starting to turn orange. So that's a pretty good picture of a pretty well processed group of tires there. So some of the elements, permitting, licensing, there's reimbursements. We have waste tire cleanup provisions in the regulations, and we'll discuss how we track and how the fees are set up. Okay, who at DEQ handles all the different elements? Permitting and licensing are both handled by the Waste Permits Division, us in the Permits Division. That's the generators, the transporters, and the processors and collection centers. The fees are handled exclusively by the Fiscal Division. The generators pay the fees and they're submitted monthly to the Fiscal Division. Reimbursements it's sort of a joint effort there between Waste Permits and Fiscal. Those are the processor reimbursements, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Our Surveillance Division also inspects generators and processors. If there's an enforcement, if there's a regulatory violations, the enforcement folks get involved. We also have an audit services section under the Office of the Secretary. There's about 4 auditors there that are, think exclusively dealing with waste tire audits, different types of audits, whether they're processors or primarily generator audits. So how many tires are there? There are lots of different types of tires. Some are defined, some are not defined in the regulations. Tire, used tire, waste tire are defined. We also have manifested waste tires, unmanifested waste tires, and that's not defined in the regulations. And there's some other minor types of tires that aren't defined as well. So what is a tire? You know, tire basically is a covering for a wheel. And tires can be solid, which you don't really see very many of. Military tires were solid tires. Probably forklift tires are solid tires, but primarily they're pneumatic coverings. A lot of people don't know what all of these letters and numbers on when you buy a set of tires means, but this is kind of an explanation. I pull this off the website from Felling Trailers, so we'll give them credit for this particular slide. You see the nominal width in millimeters on the northwest portion of the tire. You can see P, meaning passenger, 215. So width in millimeters. I'm not really sure why the width is in millimeters and the rim diameter is in inches, but that's how they do it. Aspect ratio is just height to width. The load index, and also snow condition. M+S means mud and snow. On the left side, I guess, one of the more important elements on the tire in very fine print is maximum inflation pressure, maximum permissible inflation pressure. That's an important number. So just give you an idea of what, when you buy a tire, this is what the numbers mean. We always talk about, oh, the tread on the tire, how much tread does it have? Well, it's a heck of a lot more complex than just tread. As you can see in terms of the structure on the top, you can see tread is just one part of all the structural elements of a tire. You also have under tread, cap piles, carcass, inner lining. That's pretty much standard tire construction, but it gets even more complex than that. So this is sort of a generalized diagram of what goes into a tire. This is from Tire Works, website Tire Works. So that's where I pull that off of their website, give them credit for that. Here's another Tire Works slide, by the way. I didn't put their credit on there. I apologize for that. A lot of people don't know how does that tire sit on the rim and not fall apart? Well, that's due to the bead. Bead is a rather simple sort of assembly, but a very, very important part of the assembly. The where you see bead inside the middle there is it's wire basically. It's cable that's twisted and it runs throughout the length of the tire, throughout the diameter of the tire. That's where it is on the tire. So it allows the tire to sit on the rim and not come apart, basically. And this is from CartFab. Give CartFab credit for this slide, please. That's a cross section of tire bead photograph. Actually, it's a little hard to see, but that circle, you can see the wire inside there. That's the cable of the bead. Some of these tires, particularly the off-road tires that are hundreds and hundreds of pounds, have tire bead that sometimes is 2, 3, 4 inch diameter. So just to give you an idea that when you start chopping tires, when you start processing tires, you're going through some pretty serious material there when you're trying to chop cable that's 3, 4, 5 inches in diameter. What are tires made of? Again, from Tire Works. Only about 20% of a passenger tire is rubber. A lot of it is synthetics and fillers. And there's a percentage of antioxidants, anti-zonants. Those are there to make the tire last longer, essentially. And steel. About 12% of it is steel. So in a truck tire, it's a little bit different. There's a little bit more rubber, a little bit more steel, and other than that, pretty much the same as a passenger tire. We're going to get a little bit more into the different classifications of tires later too. When we say passenger tire, truck tire, we'll get into a little more detail later. Used tire is just one that you can't use anymore, essentially for its intended purpose. DPS has a regulation with regards to that. I think the tread depth is 1/16 of an inch, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but it used to be 1/16 of an inch or greater tread, the tire was still usable. Less than that, it's not usable and should be considered a waste tire. DEQ does not regulate used tires. All right, I want to make that real clear. We do not regulate used tires, but we do regulate waste tires. And that's a tire that you can't use for its intended purpose or has been otherwise discarded, which sort of borrows from the definition of solid waste as well. A tire might be a usable tire, but if it's discarded, it then becomes a waste tire. We regulate waste tires. Just for clarification purposes, when we get into the manifest, a tire that is manifested means that it's accompanied by a manifest. A tire that's not manifest means it's not accompanied by a manifest. It's fairly straightforward there. And those are not defined in the regulations too. So this is how we track tires, through the use of a manifest. Manifest is essentially one sheet of paper that describes everything about where that tire, the waste tire began, its generation point, and to the destination point. And actually even beyond that, it's even more than a cradle to grave. It goes beyond that, and I'll explain that in a second. If you're familiar with environmental sampling, a manifest is ostensibly a chain of custody. It tracks the tire from the point of generation to, like I say, even beyond the point of disposal, in the case of something that goes to a beneficial use project. This is what manifest looks like. Now, we have two different types of manifests. We have a generator manifest and we have a processor manifest. The generator manifest begins with the generator. That's section 1. In other words, when someone generates tires, say Walmart or tire engineers or whatever, they pull tires off a car, they put new tires onto a car. The old tires become waste tires. That's the point of generation. Those tires are stored there until such time as a transporter, a licensed transporter, we'll get into that too, will pick them up. And then the transporter then delivers them to what we call a waste tire destination. Typically a processor, could be a landfill, typically a processor that's going to essentially recycle or process the tires for disposal. So that's the 4 elements of a generator manifest. This, well, I think I said, we have about 3,800 generators in the state of Louisiana. I thought I had a slide on that. I think I do later, but anyway. Processor manifest. This is the other type of manifest that we use. Well, this one, this manifest begins at the processor's yard or plant because the tires have now been chopped, sliced, whatever. They're ready to either be disposed or they're ready to go to beneficial use. So the point of generation of the waste tire material primarily is going to be with the processor. Now we can either market whole waste tires. Waste tires can go to beneficial use projects. We really just don't see that many of that. It's predominantly waste tire material. So we sort of stick with that language. So the waste tire material starts at the processor. It's transported by someone. You don't have to be a licensed transporter to transport waste tire material, but nonetheless, we track who's moving this material on the manifest, just so that we have knowledge of where all this material is going. And then it goes to a destination facility, which, like I said, could be a landfill, it could be a beneficial use project. Mostly beneficial use projects. There's material that is landfilled. Primarily, it's going to be OTRs that are just so large, the processor just cannot take OTRs and process them to the point where they can actually market the material. Essentially, they're chopped up in halves or fourths, and then they're disposed at landfills. So that's primarily what the material that's disposed at landfills are really OTRs primarily, OTR material. Now, we'll get into a little bit more of dealing with the waste management fund, waste tire management fund. We need to know what an eligible waste tire is. An eligible waste tire is there's 2 key elements here. Number 1 is there was an environmental fee paid. We've all bought tires before. And when you buy tires, you see on your invoice that there's a line that says LDEQ environmental fee. That that fee is $2.25 for a passenger tire. So you pay that, and that's one of the elements that makes that tire an eligible tire. Also, the waste tire generated in Louisiana. So if you buy it at a Walmart here in Baton Rouge, and then that qualifies. So essentially, eligible tires are two most important parts there. The environmental fee was paid and it was generated in the state of Louisiana. There's a couple other things that are important as well, but that's primarily those two. And those are the tires of the waste tire material which a processor may be reimbursed for. We do not reimburse processors taking ineligible waste tires or waste tire material to a project. So only eligible tires or eligible waste tire material are we allowed to pay processors for. And that is what we track very, very carefully here in waste tire section. Again, the waste tire management fund is included in section 2418. You can go to the statutes and read exactly what it's about. It also establishes fees. Whenever you buy tires, you're going to pay that Louisiana DEQ environmental fee. That's the fees that are described here in the statutes. And the process of reimbursements come out of that fund, as I mentioned already. How much do they get paid? They get paid 7.5 cents per pound that goes through an approved project. All the projects that the processors request reimbursements for have to be approved by the department prior to them delivering material to that project. So they're paid at a rate of 7.5 cents per pound. So there are program ineligible tires. Essentially, it's just tires that are not DEQ, where the DEQ fee has not been paid, or a tire that has been generated out of state. Essentially, those are the two main categories there. Solid tires are not eligible tires either. Tires weighing more than 500 pounds are not eligible. So a lot of the OTRs that you see around that weigh 12, 14, 15, 1,600 pounds are not eligible tires. And the processors take them, I guess as a part of their business, they have customers that need to get rid of these tires, but they're not eligible tires. So even more of an impetus for them not to try to take it down and try to market it rather than just cut it in half or force and landfill it. So who handles tires in Louisiana? Primarily the big three: a generator, transporter, processor. Collection centers are usually set up through the parishes or municipalities where people can go, citizens can go and just drop tires off that maybe someone dropped into their yard or whatever. But primarily we deal with generators, transporters, and processors. But a lot of people actually handle tires. Generators defined in the regulations. It's just essentially someone whose activities generate a waste tire. In other words, if you take a tire off a rim and take the tire that you took off the rim and set it aside, you've generated a waste tire essentially. All these folks have to be licensed through the department. I said it earlier, we have about 3,800 licensed generators in Louisiana currently. And this is who they are. Essentially, they're tire dealers. They can be new and used tire dealerships and different type repair shops. Even waste piles, we consider waste piles as being a generator because there's a form that when we clean up a waste tire pile, we're essentially giving a form to someone on a temporary basis to be a generator. If you want to be a generator, you need to notify us and fill out the form that's on the website. I'll show you that later. Collect fees as required by the statutes. And there's also a sign, and you should see this sign if you ever bought tires in Louisiana, saying the Louisiana DEQ fee is imposed upon these types of tires, and this is what the fees are. It's not exactly a permit. We actually just give an identification number. So they notify us. We go through the process of going through the form, making sure all the information is correct and complete, give them a number for it, and they're good to go. There's no fee for being a generator. There's no fee for submitting an application. And here's the application. Essentially one page. It's pretty straightforward, actually. There is also too, I'll point this out, on all of our forms and waste tire section on our website, all the forms are accompanied by a guidance document right behind the form. So if you have any questions about the form, you can refer to the guidance document, probably get your question answered. If you can't, you can always call us, no problem. But there's a guidance document that accompanies all the forms. A couple of things I'm going to point out on the form that are of importance. A lot of people fail to include their tax ID or social security number. This will delay you in getting a notification of your ID. Make sure this is on the form. A lot of people forget it. And also driver's license numbers and state tax ID information. Those are the two things that people either do incorrectly or just omit, and that's going to delay processing the application. This is the current fee schedule. Passenger tires, you pay $2.25 per tire, trucks $5. The $2.25 was an increase as of October 2018. It used to be $2 prior to that. Now it's $2.25. We exempt 500-pound or more tires. We also exempt golf cart tires and small tires. They're de minimis in nature, so those are exempted. All right, moving on to transporters. Well, yeah, person who transports waste tires is a transporter. And the regulations for transporters is 105.19 in that same 105.05 section. But in fact, if you don't transport more than 20 waste tires at a time, you don't need a transport authorization. But if you do, then you need a transport authorization certificate, and we issue that through the division here in the waste tire section. I want to make real clear that all of the authorizations expire July 31st. A lot of people get either confused with that, or they let things get away from them and they wind up getting in a bind. Having 200 or so transporters to process on the same date every year is really pretty difficult for the staff here. So if you are a transporter, it would behoove you to get your renewal in early if possible, because all of the authorizations expire on July 31st. And that's one thing that we have a problem with every year. A lot of people get late. We just get a whole lot of backed up applications at that time. Those all have to be signed by the assistant secretary, which makes it even more difficult because you have to make sure that that person is available to sign all of these things. Yeah, there's a few other things you have to submit. Be nice to have your vehicles registered. Be nice to have commercial insurance for your vehicle. You don't actually have to prove a driver's license, but you should have a driver's license as well. And a surety bond. We require a surety bond in the event that maybe the truck full of tires doesn't get to where it's supposed to get and winds up in a place where we may have to come back later and clean up tires. Or if there's other problems with the truck, there may be accidents or whatever that could happen, that we want to make sure that the tires aren't going to wind up just lying on the side of the road. And other things too. Decals, we provide the decals so that the trucks can be identified. You have decals on both sides of the truck. So if you're going down the road with more than 20 tires and, maybe law enforcement pulls you over, if you got the decal and you got your license, you'd be good to go. Fees, there are fees for transporters. Right now, the fee is $125 per year and $37 per truck. So to get one truck license per year, it'll cost you $157. So again, if you don't transport more than 20 waste tires at a time, you don't need a certificate. So we get a lot of calls saying, well, I got some tires I found. I don't know what to do with it. Should I call someone, or how do I do this? And we ask them, really the first question is, how many do you have? And if someone says, well, I only have about 10 tires. So that's a pretty cheap option. Well, if you got a pickup truck, you can put the 10 tires in the pickup truck and go to a processor. So just so you'll know, if it's 20 or less, you can transport tires without a license. And waste tire material. So the processor loads up a 53-foot truck with waste tire material to go to a project. That truck does not need a transporter license. There's the transporter form. I don't think I have anything highlighted on that form, sorry. Same thing, it's on the website. It's got a guidance document behind it. It's a longer form because we have to have all of the proof for the surety bond information and all that. And I didn't include all of that on the presentation, but it's all on the website, and it will explain to you how the vehicles that are available to you for the surety bond is all explained in the guidance document as well. All right, moving on to processors. Well, yeah, anyone who processes tires, what is processing? Essentially taking the tire and making it not a whole tire. There's lots of ways to do it. Typically, chipping, cutting, grinding is the process of choice. And those standards are in section 105.25 of the regulations. How many of them are in Louisiana? Well, about 5. Colt Incorporated has 2 facilities, one in Scott, Louisiana, and one in New Orleans East. Environmental Industries is located sort of in Urbanville, I guess, Port Allen area. Benson Environmental Services is located in south of Sibley in Webster Parish. Franklin Rubber Resources is located in Winsboro. Cottonport Montefiore is technically a permitted processor, but Cottonport Montefiore has not been operating since about 2015. I got these are just some photographs off Google. I just wanted to show you what they actually look like. This is the Benson facility up in Sibley. Up in the northwest portion of the screen, you can see okay, I'm going to try to point that out a little more carefully here. This is the processing area where all of the chipping and grinding goes on. This pile here, as you can possibly see, it's whole tires getting ready to be processed. And this is tire material that's piled up, ready to be sent off to a beneficial use site. These are tire piles, whole tire piles, whole waste tire piles. There's regulatory standards for how long they can be, how wide, how high, and the distance between them, egress to the site, in the event that something bad happens out here. This is the Colt facility in Scott, pretty much the same setup. Here's process areas, whole tires being waiting to be processed. Here's some waste tire material that's already been processed. They have essentially a warehouse repair shop here. They do a lot. As you can imagine, if you have this many trucks and trailers, there's going to be a lot of maintenance that's going to take place. And that's the maintenance shop. They all essentially have maintenance facilities as well. This is the Colt New Orleans East facility. This is the main building and process area here. Here's a few whole tires. They don't process quite as much numerically as some of the other folks, but this is in the New Orleans East area. Environmental Industries, essentially in Port Allen, I guess, Irwinville. The process area is here. Maintenance shop here. Whole tires waiting to be processed out here. And this is the waste tire material that's been processed, ready to be shipped off. Winsboro, Franklin Rubber Resources. There's a lot more process area in this for this processor because they actually will make crumb rubber. So they actually have a cryogenic unit down here in addition to the main processing unit here and warehousing here, office building here. This is whole waste tires out here, and this is waste tire material. Cottonport's actually was permitted as a monofill and a processor. Obviously, this is the monofill. The idea there was that material could be processed here, placed in the monofill, and then at some point be taken out of the monofill to be used for whatever the beneficial use was anticipated. I think this was primarily for rubber modified asphalt, essentially road aggregate. It just never did work out for these folks. And so this is what's pretty much still here now. Here's a lot of whole waste tires in piles that are out there. Again, this hadn't operated since 2015, but it does have an actual permit. All right, speaking of permits, yeah, they're 5-year permits as opposed to 10-year permits, which is kind of typical of DEQ. The most important point I want to make here is that there's just a lot of public notice with regards to a processor permit. There's public notice before the application's even been sent. There's public notice after the application's been sent. There's public comment periods after the application is noticed, and DEQ has to respond to all these things. So it's a very time-consuming type of permit. Just in the event you were interested in getting a permit, it takes a long time to do that, typically. And they also, of course, as all permits, hazardous or solid waste permits, there's financial assurance requirements. The vehicles for processor permits are either a financial guarantee or performance bond or letter of credit. The financial assurance presently is for $20 per ton of waste tire material. So looking back at the material that's inventoried at the site at any one particular time, the processor has to have at least $20 per ton in the financial assurance vehicle to be able to clean up either the tires or the waste and waste tire material. A lot of other requirements. I mean, I'm not going to go through all the regulations by any means, but some of the more important ones to submit at the end of the month, every processor has to submit all their manifests, hard copies, all their processor manifests, hard copies, in addition to the scale weight tickets on the processor manifest. I didn't mention that earlier, but each processor manifest has to have a Louisiana certified scale weight ticket associated with it. That's how we verify how much material went from the processor to either the landfill or the beneficial use. If they're a collection center, they submit a monthly report. If they're asking for requests for payment for beneficial use, that has to accompany that, as well as electronic versions of both the generator and processor spreadsheets. In addition, for the processor to get paid, annual agreements have to be entered into by both the department and the processor. It just essentially outlines what I just mentioned here in terms of what's going to be required on a monthly basis for us to process a reimbursement and then actually pay the processor. And that's just essentially it is a contract between the DEQ and the processor. All right, for reimbursements, again, only eligible material can be reimbursed. We don't reimburse for ineligible material, and that's laid out on in the manifest. So we can see exactly what is ineligible that might have gone to a project, what's eligible that has gone to a project. Just for facts, eligible and ineligible material can be legally disposed in landfills, type 1, type 2 solid waste landfills, not C and D landfills. So if you want to dispose of material, you can do that in type 1, type 2, but not C and Ds. This is us in the waste tire section. This is what we do, is review all of those things that came in every month. Manifest, hard copy manifest, electronic spreadsheets. We have a QC, an electronic QC that goes through all this. It goes through, I think, 70 something plus checks to make sure all of the electronics agree with the hard copy manifest. In addition, we also hand check every line of every processor manifest of every processor every month to make sure the processor manifests are absolutely correct, because that's where that is tied to the reimbursement. So we want to make sure that that is absolutely correct. Additionally, we hand check about 40% of about 20% of the generator manifests every month. Generator manifest number in the tens of thousands. It would be pretty difficult to hand check 100% of that, but we do check 20% of the generator manifest per month. We check 100% of the manifest per month. That's what we do here. All right, we'll talk a little bit about the projects. People might be interested in, well, what do y'all do with this material? What are the processes do with the material? A lot of different types of things that you can do. Primarily here in Louisiana, civil engineering is, we have one land reclamation project that essentially is, most of the material goes to that. We do have a fair percentage of chrome that's produced, and tire derived fuel is nationally, the volume of TDF is decreasing. That's primarily as a result of the natural gas prices being low. But tire-derived fuel is an excellent source of fuel for boilers and industrial furnaces and things because of the BTU value is so much higher than gas. But it has drawbacks in terms of having to scrub a lot of that material that comes out of the stacks. And it also makes good leachate collection systems. Believe it or not, when you put tire chips in a collection system, it has a lot of porosity and permeability, so it works very well. In 2020, this is a summary that we put together every year and send to the legislature with regards to the projects. You'll see the different types of projects on the left column here. We delivered, well, I say we, the process has delivered material to 19 different projects during 2020 is a 2020 summary, and to the tune of about close to 145 million pounds of material that was delivered. The vast majority of it are eligible material, but about 145 pounds in 2020. A little bit more in detail about some of the projects. This is a land reclamation project well, I'm not going to say where it is actually, but this is a pit of about 50, 60 yards or so, I would say. I'm sorry, acres, not yards, acres. The way this project is worked is that you can see waste tire material on the left side here in soil and Coke bottles, I guess, to some extent on the right. It's mixed in 50-50, in a 50-50 mix, and then pushed into the hole, graded out, compacted. That's me for scale, by the way. So that shows you the size of this pit actually. So it's a rather large pit. This is a land reclamation pit. Immediately adjacent to the large pit, there was a small pit that we allowed them to reclaim as well. You can see this pit is just about finished. You can see we're leaving 3 foot. The material comes up to about 3 foot of grade, and then clean soil is being placed over that, compacted in lifts, and it'll be graded out and then vegetated and then used for, in this case, pasture. Another an engineering type of project is slope stabilization. This is up in North Louisiana, and you can see this. It's kind of hard to see actually the photograph, but we have some pretty steep slopes here. A lot of erosion, rill and gully erosion. This was an old sand pit that was basically excavated out the side of a hill, and then once the material was, I guess, spent, that was it. They walked away, and then this remains. And it's kind of a dangerous situation. It's immediately adjacent to neighborhoods where children can go out there and get exposed, maybe get themselves hurt. So in order to prevent that, what we gave them the approval for us to stabilize the slopes at that pit. And this is a before and after shot. So that was what you saw before. That's what it's looking like now. The pit, it's about 60% complete. There's a lot more outside the photograph, but another type of slope stabilization where you have ponds. This was actually an old sand pit. The sides of the pond were eroding in, and so tire materials brought in, compacted in lifts, covered like this. This is a different pit, but it's essentially the same process. And then it's vegetated, and then it can be used. And it stops the erosion of the slopes along the pond. Again, leachate collection. This is not a very good photograph, but you can see the leachate standpipe here. When landfills open up new cells, they'll petition the processor for material to use in the leachate or the gas collection systems. And we've probably all seen some of these crumb rubber playground areas where you see that. Also fields, sports fields. I think the Superdome is a crumb rubber field. All right, a lot of people ask about cleanups. How do we go about cleaning up if we have dumped tires here or there? There are actually 4 different ways you can clean up, and they're in section 105.29. The A through D illustrates the 4 different types of cleanups, how you can go about doing this. There's cleanups for property owners, single events, which is predominantly what we see. Government tire sweeps and third-party type cleanups. And these are all in the regulations in those sections. If you're a property owner, as long as you didn't put the tires there, you have no problem here. You can bring tires, like I say, less than 20 to a permanent processor. Collection centers can only take 5 or less. And what we need from you is a single event sweep, the sweep form. I'm going to show you that in just a second. Well, in a couple of minutes. Single event cleanups, those are predominantly what we see. You can be a business, organization, government entity, whatever. We need to get the sweep form from you. We need some time to process that. Give us 30 days to process that. And all the other regulatory requirements are there. The processor will have to manifest the tires. They're ineligible as well. All the tires from these events are ineligible. Government tire sweep is just that. It's for governments, not businesses or individuals. It's ostensibly the same thing as the household hazardous waste days, where you can bring paint or other stuff to the municipality that's picking them up. We do need a sweep form on this, and there's a maximum of 5 tires. And all the other regulatory requirements are you have to apply with the other regulatory requirements, manifests and whatnot. A third-party cleanup is a little different animal. We really don't see that too often. Governments will submit those to us once in a while. Essentially, these are promiscuous dumps, and the sweep form is not used. It's a little bit more involved. We need to get a police report, certify the information. We need to know what you did to try to keep it from happening again. Some people put cameras, governments will put cameras at intersections or possibly fences or whatever. Like I said, it's a little more involved. And we give you 520 eligibility. The eligibility is 520 tires per year on these things. And all the other regulatory requirements are in place, but no sweep form. All right, I'm going to go right into the sweep form. This is the sweep form. It's also on the website. Here is essentially what I want people to know is that if you're going to do a government tire sweep, we don't get this. Sometimes this is omitted. The government entity omits this. And so it's just something I want to point out to you to make sure that if you're a government entity, make sure you fill this out. This is just what type of application is it, single event or whatever. And then we need to try to find out how did the tires get here? So we can maybe prevent that from happening, or the government entity can prevent it from happening in the future. If you do fill out, when you do fill out the sweep form, overestimate the number of tires. If you think that there's 100, there's more than likely a lot more than 100 in there. So in order to prevent having us to go back and modify this, or if the time frame is expired, to go back and do a whole new form, overestimate the number of tires. It's really not a big deal. We don't care how many tires are there. We want all the tires picked up, and the least amount of hassle we have going back and forth with people with the forms, the better. Just to point out a couple of things in which some folks did even yesterday. As a result of an environmental audit years ago with regards to, well, how does the department know that the mass of the tires are matching up with what the processors say the mass of the tires are, that we're paying them, in terms of the reimbursements. How are we doing that? And they weren't real happy, I suppose, with how we were doing that at the time. So one of the things that we came up with was, why don't we weigh tires ourselves and match that against what the tire processors are saying the tires are weighing. So we do that triennially, which means every 3 years, of course. We're just starting another one, in fact, yesterday. So we're up for our 3-year renewal on this. And then what we do is we take the results. We do a lot of statistical analysis on the results here internally, just so we'll know. But then we also, those results are compared with what the processors are saying. That's done on a monthly basis. That's one of the QCs that we do. We take our numbers and compare and make sure that they're within a 10% range. And if we're within the 10% range, then we're probably talking, it's pretty accurate. So far, what we've seen is passenger tires. A long time ago, the PTE, the National Passenger Tire Equivalent figure was 20 pounds per tire. Well, tires have gotten a lot bigger over the years. And right now, what we're seeing here in Louisiana from our data, tires weigh 27 to 30, 31 pounds per tire, passenger tire on average. Truck tires, obviously a lot heavier, about 108, 110, 115. OTRs and exempts are the variability in those two categories is so great. We don't worry too much about them really. I mean, they can be very, very large and they can be very, very small. But those are pretty good numbers for the passenger and truck tires. They work well with us. It's exceedingly rare that we vary over the 10% with the processes, which means that we've got some good numbers here. Currently, this is what we're using as a comparison, 2,812 essentially for passenger and trucks. And again, these numbers are built into spreadsheets that we use to QC the processor requests every month. So we're matching them every month. This is just a picture of us. We weigh tires when it's cold and wet and windy, and we weigh tires when it's hot and wet and windy. It's a volunteer program, so that you can see the faces change. Anyway, you can call them challenges or problems. We'll call them challenges here. One of the big problems that we have, obviously, is generators not remitting fees. We've got 3,800 or so generators, and every one of them has to remit the fees that they supposedly collect every month to the fiscal division. It's kind of like having a business with 3,800 employees and they all have access to the cash register. So obviously we're going to have problems with that. Got a lot of illegal dumping still. When tires, if it costs money to dispose of a tire properly, then you're going to find illegal dumping of tires. That's life. Waste tire material markets are very, very fickle too. Like I said, the TDF market has declined steadily for years. There's not a lot of interest here, unfortunately, in tire derived aggregate for road use, but in other states, particularly up in the north, it's used rather extensively and successfully. There's not a whole lot of demand here for that. We do have a depolymerization plant in Mississippi. I say we do, Mississippi does in Natchez. They take a few tires, well, some tire material from us here, but not a whole lot. So markets are difficult. And then there's other issues for the inspectors. Generators cause problems for them with cover and paperwork issues and things of that nature. And the engineers do the process, and auditors do the process inventories every year, and there's sometimes discrepancies between our numbers and their numbers. Okay, I'm wrapping up here. This is pretty standard stuff. This is all over the website, but I'm including it here, just general information. If you see someone dumping tires, though, in the act of dumping tires, please call law enforcement, because it's hard to catch those folks. But if you see tires dumped that have already been there, this is the folks you need to call. You need to call our single point of contact. That's their information, and you'll have all these slides, and it's all on the website as well. So I'm just going through it. If you need specific information, this is us. This is the entire waste tire section. In fact, Kurt is. We can all do. We're basically cross-trained, but if you want to get to the person that's primarily responsible for these different items, and Kurt for generators, Jody, who just presented for recycling, handles transporters. I'll deal with processors and projects mostly, and Kim is our newest person here. She's going to handle everything one day, but right now she's handling generators and transporters. But I think that is it. And Tamika, I'll turn it back to you.
All righty. Thanks, Jody and Dutch. Thanks for participating, everyone. I hope this information is helpful to you, and you will join us again for an Enviroschool webinar.